see you guys in the dark.
The story I'm about to tell happened because I guess I am too nice to people. When I was 17, I was a pretty blonde girl who was very nerdy. I would often get guys who wanted to be more than friends when they found out I liked games and films, but they always just made their crushes known, and I would gently let them down. I had a high school boyfriend at the time. I worked at a movie theater in the Midwest. I loved this job and became good friends with the people I worked with. It was the perfect job for a teen who loved movies and needed to work after school. That was until I met Simon. Simon was a guy who worked at the theater with me. He seemed nice enough. A little geeky and not very attractive, but kind of just a regular guy, and I was friendly as I always was. He was almost 10 years older than me, so I wasn't too worried about him thinking I wanted to be more than friends. As time went on, he gave me more and more attention, talking to me for hours during the downtime when movies were playing. I suspected he might like me, but I wasn't too worried as he was a manager, and I wasn't, and dating between managers and staff was not allowed. So I thought he would just keep it to himself. Then after a year, I was asked to move to another theater as the one I worked at would be shutting down in a few months. I agreed, but was the only staff member to be offered this option. I realize now that this is not as fruitless as I thought it would be. Just a week after I started at the new movie theater, Simon showed up to say hi. I was friendly as always and was nice to him. After all, we were the same movie chain, so he could come here to watch movies for free if he wanted to. I thought it was innocent, but soon started to feel uncomfortable when all of the time Simon was spending hanging out at the movie theater. I asked my coworkers if he came in when I wasn't there, but they said no. Then it dawned on me that we no longer worked at the same movie theater, so he was free to pursue me romantically without worrying about his job. This made me worried as he started not awkwardly flirting with me. I found out later that a girl at my job who didn't like me had Simon a copy of my schedule for the next 2 months. So I started to hide. Every time I saw him, I would make some excuse to go and hide in the stock room or the projection booth. It was starting to make me very uneasy. My boss, who is still a great friend to me, noticed how uncomfortable I was, and told me if I wanted to, I could report it to the home office and get him to stop. I thought this was taking it too far, and I declined, thinking eventually he would give up. Well, he didn't. He came in close to my birthday and dropped off a card and a CD with lots of rather creepy music on it. I had finally had enough and told my boss to report him. The management told him he wasn't allowed to come to my theater again or he would be fired. I didn't see him for a few months. Thought it was over, but then I had people I worked with at the old theater who went to the high school with me coming up to me in the halls and cussing me out for getting Simon in trouble. They said I had led him on and that he was a lonely guy who had a crush on, and it was cruel, and that I got him in trouble or that I wouldn't give him a chance. I was horrified that he had been spreading these rumors to people I thought were my friends, and now were attacking me at school. I spent the next few months afraid to go anywhere. I lived in a small town and was terrified of going out in case I ran into him. I am a genuinely nervous person who scares easily, so my parents thought I was overreacting. My boss told me not to worry, and that Simon probably had given up on me. Oh, how I wish that had been true. The day the old theater closed down, I was at work. I had to work late, and me and my boss were the last ones to leave for the night. My boss, Peter, asked me to wait for him so he could pick the lock up together. It was about 2 a.m. once we left. The door had been locked since 10 p.m. so no customers could get in. As we walked out, my boss, who had kind of a sick sense of humor, was joking about Simon and his crush on me, probably trying to make light of it to cheer me up. When we stepped outside, I turned to lock the door, and my boss shouts, "There he is!" I thought he was joking again, and turned to tell him that it wasn't funny. But he wasn't joking. Simon was standing there, with Peter just between us. I froze. My entire body went rigid, and I didn't know what to do. I heard Simon say my name, and saw him try to get around my boss, but Peter spread his arms out and blocked him from me. I saw that he had to get his eyes fixed on me. Peter told Simon to get out of here, and that I didn't want to see him. I struggled to unlock the door, which was notoriously sticky, to get open. I could hear Simon trying to get my attention, but I just focused on the lock. Finally it gave way and I rushed inside, running for the office, which had a deadbolt security door. I unlocked it and sat inside hyperventilating. Peter came in and shut the door, checking in if I was okay. He told me he told Simon to go home and to not come back or he would call the cops. We sat in the office and waited for what seemed like forever. Peter then said he would go and check to make sure he had left, and I stayed in the locked office. A few minutes go by, and I hear Peter's voice telling me that he was coming back in. When he opened the door, he looked furious and headed straight for the phone. I asked what was wrong, and he said that Simon was still out there. Apparently he had parked in the shadow of the theater where it was hard to see. He parked in such a way that he would have to have walked past him to get to my car. He had parked his van, a van I didn't know he had in the shadows. Peter had found him crouched down beside the van, as if waiting for something, waiting for me to walk by. Peter had shouted he was calling the cops and ran back inside. By the time the cops showed up, he had left. They took a statement, and Peter gave them all of Simon's contact information, as it was still in the system. We guessed he showed up today, because he was no longer at risk of losing his job, as the theater had closed down. I never saw Simon again, but it didn't mean I wasn't terrified. I spent the whole year up until I moved away, terrified I might run into him again. I never did, but it ruined what should have been a great summer before I left for college. I hate to think of what would have happened if my boss hadn't been there that night, or hadn't been smart enough to check that Simon had left. I am still good friends with Peter. He even came to my wedding. I owe him an unknown debt. And to Simon, wherever you are, let's not meet again.
So this all happened throughout my high school experience. I'm currently a junior at my school, and this all started the second semester of my freshman year. The first incidents were close to the end of the freshman year. There were a few my sophomore year, and then there's only been one so far my junior year, and it's all completely true. I tried looking for the police records that go with it, but I couldn't find anything, because of how long it was. The guy in question, I'll call him Alex, is Asian, with really short hair, and something like 5'4". He's in the same grade as my oldest sister. He's also an avid user of cigarettes, alcohol, and the likes. He even bragged to me that he got his license taken away because he went 60 miles an hour above the speed limit on a highway. A damn highway with the limit of 65 miles per hour. That meant he went at 125. So basically, an ill-behaved boy was chasing a really good girl. I'll give you the entire story now, and I hope it makes everyone who reads this a little more careful when making new friends. The second semester of my freshman year, I took an art class in hopes to get an elective credit. I was sitting with some friends talking about the projects we were making, and Alex walks through. I'd never noticed him in class before, which was really strange. I should also put this on a timeline for you, to make this a little easier to follow. It was close to prom season, so early March, and luckily close to the end of the year. He started talking about whatever, and we really hit it off. After a week, I started seeing him popping up around me, in the hallways, outside my classes, and he'd talk to me during passing time. I didn't think much of it, being the stupid, naive child I was. I should also mention that he rode my bus in the afternoon. Alex and I would sit by each other on the bus and talk, which just encouraged further interaction with him. One day, my older sister, who is 2 grades above me, didn't have theater practice after school, so she took the bus home. And when she got on, she saw me next to Alex. Her face had turned white, and she sat down near the front of the bus. I thought it was really strange, so I planned on asking her about it when I got off the bus, but I forgot to. As prom got even closer, Alex kept talking about it with me. My friends and I all assumed he was going to ask me, because not only did he follow me around, but he wouldn't shut up about it, and he was clearly showing signs of interest in me. Unfortunately for him, however, I was in a relationship with someone at the time, and it was a girl. I had absolutely no interest in dating him. If he did ask me, though, I would need to say we'd need to go as friends. Thankfully, Alex told me instead that he'd like me to tell Tanya that if she didn't have a date, that he'd love to bring her. almost immediately remembering the incident on the bus. I just said, "She's got a date already, but thanks," wanting to protect her. Over the next few days, Alex actually started talking about sexual statics. Things like average length of someone's manhood, or the average age someone loses their virginity. I got super uncomfortable about this, and told some of the boys in my class that if it got brought up again, I'd go sit with them, and they gladly offered to protect me. This was my first set of red flags. Another instance that set off red flags about Alex was when I got home, and the doorbell rang. I looked out the window and saw Alex there. This wasn't the strangest part, because I got off the bus before Alex did, so he saw where I had lived. I yelled to my mom that someone was here to see me, and I went out on the front porch to go talk to him. He was with his friends, and yelled to them that he was going to catch up with them later, and he wanted to talk to me first. He told me about some mundane stuff, and I was getting bored. So bored, in fact, that I just bluntly decided to ask him if he liked me. I was tired of him always beating around the bush, and I just wanted a stupid answer. Alex kind of froze and danced around the subject, confirming my suspicions. The way he avoided telling me that he liked me was really strange, bragging to me about his drugs and illegal escapades. My dad was also just coming home from work at the time too, so I had an excuse to leave the really uncomfortable situation. When my dad came in the house, he told me about how nice Alex seemed, and I looked over to Tanya, and she looked upset about it, but neither of us said anything. Later on, not on the same day though, I posted a picture on my Instagram, and he commented on it. I still don't know how he got my Instagram to this day. He commented his phone number, telling me to text him, and that my dad was really chill. Along with the demand for me to text him, he continued to almost harass me on the direction of messaging on Instagram, asking to hang out. This was another red flag that set things off for me, making me weary of him, and I decided that I needed to be very careful with him from now on. In early May, he continued to follow me from class to class, but from a further distance. This was absolutely mortifying, but my girlfriend at the time thought it was hilarious. She said that it was funny seeing a strange boy chase a gay that had no chance with him. I laughed with her on the outside, but internally, I was really scared. It was at this time frame that he actually showed up in my window. I should mention that my parents weren't home at this time either. They were out grocery shopping while all my sisters were home alone with me. I was done with all my homework, and I was practicing my makeup skills so I can do the makeup of a few girls that were going to prom. I had my earbuds in and I was listening to my music when I heard some sort of tapping noise. I took them out, listened intently for a moment, then popped them back in. I heard the tapping noise once again and took my earbuds out again, once again listening. This happened a few times until I just kept my earbuds out permanently. I finally heard it again and found it coming from my window. I quickly wiped off my makeup and grabbed a pocket knife that I kept under my pillow. I opened my curtains and saw Alex just standing there. He was strangely dressed in a three-piece tuxedo with a single white rose. He said something and I couldn't hear him through the glass. I yelled through the glass I was going to come outside and talk to him. As I walked up the stairs to go outside, Tanya came up to me, terrified. She told me not to go outside, and I asked why. She told me that Alex was outside, and that he was dangerous. She revealed to me that he stalked her freshman year, and followed her around the way he did me. We both panicked together, and I heard the garage door open, signaling that our parents were home. We ran to the foyer, telling our dad that Alex was outside, and that he needed to do something about it. He walked over to the side of the house where my window was and talked to him. I never knew what he said, but it kept Alex away for a while, which was really nice. But things suddenly got a lot worse from there. Alex started talking to me again, but this time it was about sex and drugs, even worse than before, telling me about all the drugs he had with him and about all the girls he screwed, going into extreme detail. I went to go sit with the other boys in the art class, but it did nothing. He still talked about it, even making one of the hockey players uncomfortable. They did their best to shield me, but it only went so far. This was my final red flag. Before I deleted his number and blocked him on Instagram, I was too uncomfortable to put myself through any more social interactions with him. The worst it had gotten, though, was 2 days before the last day of school. I was getting ready for bed, around 10 p.m. when I heard a knock at my window. I once again grabbed my knife and looked out my window, assuming the worst, but praying for it to be just the bushes outside my window. I saw the very dark outline of a figure, and my heart had dropped. I knew it was Alex, so I closed my curtains and ran upstairs to my parents' bedroom, almost in tears about Alex being at my window. My dad and I both went back down to my window, and no one was there. My dad thought Alex could still be there, just hiding in the bushes outside my window. My dad decided to try to scare him off, and went to turn on the back porch lights and call for my dogs. I didn't get any more knocks at my window for maybe 2 minutes. I heard another knock and told my dad. He just marched straight outside at this point and found him sitting by my window with his hood up. I don't know what happened, but the police were called, and they had to escort him back to his house. It was terrifying, but I was pissed at that point. Why wouldn't he just leave me alone? It doesn't stop there, however. The next day during math class, I sat in a spot that faces the window. With my back to the door, halfway through the hour, one girl in the class shouts out my name, telling me to look behind me. I turn around, as does the rest of the class, and there was Alex, standing intently above me, silent. I got up, ready to punch him in the face, but he ran out the door. I just stood in the doorway of the room and broke into tears. 3 other people comforted me, and my girlfriend told the teacher what was going on. The scariest part, however, was that I never told him my schedule. Later that day, my mom, Tanya, and I went to the police at our school. When the officer said we could do a no-contact agreement, we ruled it out because it would take too long to put into place. With only a few days left in school, later when the officer talked to Alex, asking him what he did, he said it was because neither me nor my sister told him no. It was near the end of the year, and nothing happened with him over the summer. My sophomore year, though, I had another class with him. I immediately told the teacher about everything so that she knew, and everyone in class protected me from him. I had no further incidents from him. The teacher actually cared about me, and is now one of my close friends. My sophomore year was clear of any incidences, and I had pretty much forgotten the existence until recently. I woke up and checked my phone after turning off the alarm. I saw that I had gotten a random Facebook message from someone I didn't know. My Facebook is about as private as it gets, so I didn't know that it was possible to receive messages from people that I wasn't friends with on Facebook. My sophomore year, Alex was supposed to graduate, but he didn't. His name wasn't even said at the ceremony, and wasn't even listed in the program. Tanya and I both laughed about it, but we knew that it meant that he was going to be in our city longer. I looked at it anyways, and it was very sexual messages. It read, "I need to cream you and stretch it out real good, make you squirt and cream all over it." It was annoying, and I get messages like that all the time from bots on Instagram, so I would have ignored it, but because it was on Facebook Messenger, it was really strange. I clicked on the person's name, and their profile came up. I scrolled through their pictures, and I saw a picture that made my heart sink. A picture of Alex. It was Alex's profile, and he had messaged me, and changed the profile's name and location. I only showed it to a few people, but not to my parents yet. I showed it to my current boyfriend, who showed it to his mom, and she told me to tell my parents. The reason we showed it to a teacher was because he'd been around the school grounds within the last few weeks, and she may be able to do something about it. Nothing has happened with Alex since, but if something else happens, there is a chance he won't make it out of the situation alive, because I'm fed up with him, and he's caused me and my family enough grief. Please be careful who you choose to make friends with, and what sort of information you give out. Don't put yourself through what I've been through. Let's not meet again, you creepy fucker.
So these incidents started about 6 years ago and went on for a couple of years. I used to be really into the music scene,
going to shows and festivals every chance I got. This often meant meeting random people whose names I could forget 5 seconds later. As a result of being out in Atlanta nightlife so often, I got frequent friend requests on Facebook, and naive younger me blindly accepted them, assuming they were just people I had met at shows that was too drunk or distracted to remember. One day, I got a message for somebody named Eddie. His Facebook profile picture was of somebody at least a decade older than me, with long, scraggly hair. He looked harmless enough, just another show-going hippie, I assumed. His message simply asked if I was the girl that danced a half circle around him at the local show last night, and then twirled dreamily away or something along those lines. I responded that I had no recollection of that, and upon further investigation, saw that he lived in an entirely different state, so it couldn't have been me. He said that I must have had a doppelganger out there somewhere, and I left the conversation at that. Over the next few months, I'd get random notifications that he had messaged me, asking me if I'd be at various shows across the southeast. I mostly ignored the messages, but would very occasionally respond, shortly expressing interest in a band he had mentioned. The messages became more and more frequent, so I just started to leave them. Why I didn't block him is beyond me. I guess I thought he was just harmless and lonely. Fast forward about a year, it's summer of 2013, and 2 of my best friends and I are caravanning to Wakarusa, a music festival that took place in Ozark, Arkansas. It was about a 13-hour drive from Atlanta, but totally worth it. We went every year. An important note here is that this wasn't some small, intimate festival. It hosted upwards of 40,000 people, and it was often hard to keep track of my friends, let alone find people I knew who came separately. So my friends and I are on our blanket in the middle of a huge crowd, watching widespread panic. It's nighttime, so the only lights are coming from the stage, and random LED toys or glow sticks or whatever. Out of nowhere, someone beelines for our blanket, makes himself at home next to me without permission, and strikes up a conversation. My groups of friends is generally warm and accepting, and it wasn't unusual to make random friends at a big hippie fest like this. So we thought nothing of it at first, probably just someone high on ecstasy and looking for company. It wasn't until he started referencing me in my Facebook personally that the alarm bells started going off. This was Eddie. I had honestly completely forgotten about him and his persistent messages, and in the darkness there was no way I could have recognized him. He was talking like I was an old friend and tried to follow us around all night. Once I subtly alerted the others about who he was, we made every excuse in the book to try to leave, go back to our campsite, call it a night. He was painfully insistent on following us back there and continuing to hang out. Obviously, I didn't want him to know where I slept, so I tried to appease him by saying I was exhausted, but that we would try to meet up tomorrow. He finally left us alone and walked a long roundabout to our campus just in case he had watched to try to follow at a distance. The next day I made an avid point to avoid the area where we ran into Eddie. The festival venue was huge, so I figured there was no way he'd find me again. I was beside a small stage in the back corner of the venue, hooping in the woods with my friends, when I noticed him out of the corner of my eye. He was standing beside a tree alone, watching me with a weird smile. It reminded me of a proud dad watching his young daughter play, but with way creepier and more sinister overtones. Still, he hadn't done or said anything explicitly creepy or threatening, but his presence was so unsettling that I grabbed my friends and we pretended that we had forgotten about a seat that was starting to... So we ran out of the woods. I remember hoping he didn't notice I had seen him. The festival ended the next day, and I was relieved not to see him again. Fast forward about another year. At this point, I barely used Facebook and had all but forgotten about Eddie. My friend that I went to the festival with was visiting from out of town that night, and we were going to get some drinks. He got to my house, and we were catching up, and the subject of the festival came up. We started talking about Eddie and how weird the whole situation was, but at this point, it was less creepy and more of just a strange memory. I told him Eddie used to message me all the time, but that I had stopped opening them years ago. Naturally, my friend wanted to look through the messages, so I obliged. He began to scroll through the messages, and I realized just how dire of a mistake it had been not to block him. He had started asking me by what shows I was going to go to, what part of Atlanta I lived in, not taking the hint that I clearly had no interest in responding at that point. Then as the months went by, He was sending me links to tickets he had bought for me to shows in Atlanta, and then links to tickets he had bought for us to go together. There was one message asking where he could pick me up for a show that was 2 hours away in Athens, and that he couldn't wait to see me again. The messages continued to go on, but at this point I was so creeped out, I immediately blocked him and closed the computer wide-eyed. What the actual hell? He sounded like he was carrying on an entire relationship with me without my consent. He never acknowledged the fact that I literally hadn't responded to or even seen a message from him in over a year. Shaken up, we decided to just go get a drink and stop thinking about this weirdo. We get to Edgewood and walk to our favorite small bar to get a drink. As soon as we walk into the bar, my heart sinks to the pit of my stomach. To this day, this was the creepiest, most coincidental moment that I had ever happened. I see Eddie sitting at the far end of the bar. His face lights up as soon as I walk in, and he motions me over. He says something along the lines of, "I can't believe it's you," starts firing off questions about me, my life, what I've been up to, etc. At this point, my darkest feelings wash over me. I just feel unsafe and exposed. Why is he here? He doesn't even fucking live in Georgia. I quickly tell him I have to use the restroom, but then I'll be back to the bar for a drink. I grab my friend, equally in shock, and we speed past around the corner to the bathrooms and then past them. I will forever be grateful that the door to the patio area was just past the bathrooms, so we got a head start. We went outside, hopped the fence, and started running to my car. I glanced behind us, and Eddie somehow figured out in those 15 seconds that we left, and is walking rapidly across the crosswalk in our direction. Eyes on me. I fucking booked to my car, and got the hell out of Edgewood as quickly as we can, shaken. I drive us around for about an hour before eventually going home to make sure we weren't being followed. As inconclusive as the whole thing was, that was the last time I ever saw Eddie, and I often wonder if this was just a string of coincidences, or if it was more sinister. After all, he didn't even live in Georgia. Why was he at one of my favorite bars alone? The night I happened to go through all his old messages. Had he somehow gotten a hold of my location via Facebook? I made sure all my location services were off when I checked my phone. So to this day I have no idea how he ended up there, or what his intentions were. But regardless, Eddie, let's not meet again.
This story starts around 7 years ago when I was a senior in high school. I joined the cross-country team my senior year and really loved the experience and the team camaraderie. The boys and girls teams trained together in the A groups and B groups. The A group was all boys, and me. I didn't mind this. It's definitely pushed me to a better runner, but it was really difficult to try and keep up with them. Being in A group, I grew close with a lot of the guys, and they all knew I had a boyfriend. One guy, Joe, was really funny, and we got along great. We'd sit next to each other on the bus in meets, and we'd text a lot, but I thought we were just friends. After cross country ended, the boys convinced me to go indoor track, and this is where Joe got really weird. In January, my relationship ended, and it was whatever. A high school relationship ending isn't the end of the world, but Joe started acting strangely towards me. He gets really mad if I didn't text him back. I went to a house party and drank, and he sent me this long text about how he was disappointed in me, and he thought I was better than that. Our friendship started to get emotionally abusive. Joe kept on mentioning how I made him feel worthless, and he said things like, "I bet you wouldn't even care if I died." He got jealous all the time, and became so controlling. I was already under school stress, so I decided to take a break from Joe. He didn't like this. Joe started spreading rumors around school that I was hooking up with guys who had girlfriends, that I did explicit things for weed, and just really awful things. Luckily, most people didn't believe him, and by the time outdoor track came around, our friendship was completely over. I was really happy because the girls and boys track teams were two separate things, and girls distance had their own coach, and their own practices as well. So I saw Joe, but I never had to train or practice with him. He stopped calling and texting me, and that was a relief too. After track season ended, and I was about to graduate, Joe sent me a long apology. He said he didn't know he had feelings for me until my boyfriend and I broke up. He said that's what triggered his weird behavior, and that he was sorry for ruining our friendship. I accepted his apology and went on with my life. We texted from time to time, but we obviously were not close enough friends anymore. The summer after my senior year is where Joe started to make me nervous. At least once a week, at 1 and 2 in the morning, our car would drive down our street, blasting its horn. It became such an issue that the whole neighborhood was on watch for the mysterious horn blaster. I started getting texts from Joe some nights saying things like, "Come out." I'd reply the next morning with a question mark, and he'd say that he was drunk, and just drunk texted. I worked over the summer, so I was usually in bed by like 9-ish. But one night, I was up a little late. When I turned off my lights in my room, I immediately got a text from Joe that said, "Good night, Monty." This freaked me out. I told my parents everything that had happened, and they were concerned. My dad immediately thought Joe was my mysterious honker. I sent Joe a non-threatening text just saying that I worked long days, so I'm normally in bed early, so I'd appreciate not getting texted so late. I still got sporadic texts from Joe, but the mystery honker stopped, which was really great. In the fall, I went away to college one weekend. I came home, was up in my room, and I got a text from Joe at around midnight saying, "Welcome home, Monty." I freaked out and looked outside, but I didn't see his car. I asked how he knew I was home. He said lots of people were home for the weekend, so he just assumed that I was too. Joe then proceeded to favorite all my tweets, and like all my Instagram posts. I had enough of him at this point, and blocked him literally everywhere. I texted all my friends, and told them what had happened, and did not mention me to Joe at all, because he definitely was obsessed with me. Joe then called me, and told me he was going to hurt himself. I told my parents everything, and my dad got the police involved. I didn't hear from Joe after this, until 2 summers later. It's important to note around this time, one of my brothers had moved out. My mom wanted to turn my room into an office, so I moved rooms upstairs to his old room. My room now faced the back part of the house, not the street anymore. My dad works in the courts, and occasionally has to do bail duty. Whereas someone gets arrested, he's the person that has to post bail. It sucks because you can get a call at 2 a.m. and have to go bail someone out. On one particular night, my dad got a bail call at 2. He went downstairs and got water and saw the motion light in the backyard was on. That was weird. He looked out the kitchen window and saw a guy in our backyard looking up at my room. He ran outside and the guy jumped our fence. The police came and took statements, but it was the middle of the night, and my dad was pretty tired, so it could have been Joe, but the police couldn't prove it. The next few months, I felt on edge. I really felt unsafe in my own house. How did Joe know I moved rooms? How long was he be watching me? It was nauseating. My parents saw the toll that this was taking on me physically and emotionally. I was snapping at them over small things. My hair was falling out. I was losing weight. One day at breakfast, my dad walked into the kitchen and said, "I'm handling the Joe situation today. He won't bother you anymore." After that, the incidents just suddenly stopped. I ran into Joe at a party a few years later. He saw me, turned white, and left the party immediately. I have absolutely no clue what my dad did, but he made sure Joe and I will never meet again. So basically this happened about 3 years ago. All this guy still tries to contact me sometimes. Let's call him Dean. My dad owns a golf course, and we are recently hiring new people. I worked there every summer up until last year. Dean got hired, and I was pretty excited because he was younger, and pretty cute actually. We would talk a lot when we were working, and he also managed to get my number so he could text me every so often to see how I was doing or what I was up to. After a while of working with him, I considered him a close friend and enjoyed his company. I was in my final year of high school and was planning on taking off a year to travel around Europe by myself. I started to notice that I could see Dean everywhere. He would be at the mall or at the grocery store and basically everywhere that I was. He started texting me really creepy things out of nowhere, like he wanted me to have his kids and he wanted to be with me forever. I would hang out with him once in a while too. The last time we hung out, he tried to assault me, and that was the point where I realized he's very dangerous. Pretty soon after I started, I cut all contacts with him. About a month after he shows up at my house and tells me he bought a plane ticket to England and he is coming with me, and he's excited that he never has to leave me again. My dad had to call the police, and he was arrested and taken away. A little bit later after this, I leave for the year, and when I get back, he still has trying to contact me, messages me every day. So finally, my dad and I agree to meet up with him, and he tells us that he doesn't think he can live without me, and he's just going crazy. That's the last time I've talked to him in person, but every so often, I'll get a text message from a random number, and it freaks me out knowing he is still living in my area. Not sure what I'm going to do if I ever see him again up close. So Dean, let's not meet ever again.
Being on servers online can lead to a lot of unwanted attention. I'm a part of a staff team on a lot of servers, weeding out potential trolls, or just people who are looking for something we do not provide. One afternoon in October, we get a new member on the server. She went by Terrence. She created her introduction and gave her age, as we all have channels for adults to talk more freely without worrying what they might be saying in front of minors. Only being 15 years old, I gave her the roles and let her chat in the channels we offered for minors freely. Something started to get weird when I started posting selfies of myself without any cosplay gear on. No wigs, no colored contacts, no fancy outfits, just me. Now, I'm gender fluid, and so I flipped from feeling masculine and back to feminine. I have my hair short on the sides and longer on top, and stick up the top of my hair, just so I can have the best of both worlds and feel comfortable. Terrence complimented me. I thanked her, as I would with any other compliment, yet she got more involved with it. A few weeks later, she began to PM me about how she loved how I looked. I again thanked her, and kept interactions brief as I felt uncomfortable with somebody 3 to 4 years younger than me complimenting me all the time. Then she started to message me every day, from 6 a.m. in the morning to 10 p.m. at night. She started to save my selfies and make edits of them, fancying up the look on them, and then sending them to me. She started to ask for my Snapchat and my other accounts that I only use for really close friends. I, of course, denied giving it to her. At first I was weirded out. Okay, odd. I kindly asked her not to save my selfies without my permission, and please to not edit them as it was kinda creepy. I only knew her for about a month, and she's acting like I knew her for 5 years. She apologized, and said that she wouldn't do it again. There, that was the end of that. However, a few days later, more staff members on the server started to message me that Terrence was talking about me to other members who brought it up with them. She had begun to complain to other people about how I wasn't online all the time, and began to share my personal private messages, and even more selfies of me that she edited with other people. I didn't give her permission to do any of this, and so I confronted her, demanding her to stop this nonsense before it goes too far. She again apologizes, and started to go on about how she was the worst, basically guilt-tripping me into forgiving her. I didn't fall for it, and I told her bluntly, there isn't much of an excuse to the actions you have with other members either. Those kind of actions put a damper on how people see you, and when I know you as a person who does that, then immediately attaches to me. It freaked me out. Now please stop messaging me. Do not have any contact with me anymore. Her response was nothing more than, oh, okay, I'm done with life anyways. Then, it went even further. She didn't stop, and her messages got more aggressive, saying that I was the reason why she was having an identity crisis, and how she wanted to be everything that I was, how she wanted to end her life if I didn't talk with her. I started to get really freaked out, and we got rid of her. We banned her from the server, and I demanded that she would leave me alone. Friend request after friend request came, flooding in over the course of weeks. I blocked her each time to get rid of her. She started to join other servers that I am involved in just to get in contact with me. Many of my friends who were on staff ordered her to leave me alone and to never contact me again. She said she was sorry, and that she'd try again when this whole thing blows over, stating clearly what I wanted to happen in this situation. Are you freaking joking? What part of leave me alone don't you understand? You're practically stalking me now. Let me make this clear, yet again. I don't want anything to do with you. Leave me alone. You creep me out. Don't ever try to contact me again. That doesn't mean in a few months. It doesn't mean tomorrow. It means never contact me, ever again. Nothing happened for months. I was on edge, but relieved it was over. I went on with my life and started college. The relaxation came to a sudden stop one day. I got a friend request on my personal accounts on social media. These accounts that I haven't linked up to any sort of account I use for business or in my animations. She messaged me things that I have never told her. She said that she wanted to meet up with me at Tim Hortons, that I was on Main Street near my house. She even named the street. I always said I was from Canada, but never gave her the province or town I lived in. This was when it got worse. She started to harass my real-life friends to get her in contact with me. Every day, this 15-year-old would harass everybody I knew, including my mother. She wanted to be in my life, but I wanted her out of my life. And then, it just stopped. Not too long ago, she tried to send me another friend request, and I blocked her once more. Hopefully this situation is done. To that 15-year-old who doesn't understand when no really means no, let's not meet.
Back in 2013, I was living with my ex at the time, who lived near a nice country village, and as I was in between jobs at the time, I picked up a job at a local garden center. It was casual retail work, fairly decent pay, and easygoing enough that I could take a coffee break frequently and wear basically whatever I liked as long as I wore my work polo shirt. It was walking distance from my ex's house, and full of people of all ages who were the most lovely people I had ever met. Most of the regular customers who came to the garden center were usually sweet old people who could visit the cafe because we had free teas and discounted lunches for OAPs if they had a store card. So you often got to know all of them, and some of them we gave nicknames. Most of them sweet, like Pink Hair Lady, a badass 80-year-old grandma who wore a tasseled leather jacket and bright pink hair. Then there was Camper Van Couple, who used to drive a really cool camper van with bright orange flowers painted on it. You get the idea. With Creepy Artist Man, he gave most of the young girls weird vibes. He wore a straw hat, was in his late 40s, had round gold-rimmed glasses, and would wear strange graphic shirts with lewd images and slogans on the back. He always wore ripped jeans where his knees were always hanging out of them, which were always dirty with paint or mud or something else. He had this weird half-smile that would never leave his face, and a kind of leer that made people feel uncomfortable. He would take off his glasses and clean them constantly, which kind of made you feel like he was trying to get a better look at the girls who worked there, especially the younger ones. Anyways, it was a roasting hot summer's day, and I gratefully accepted the job of watering the hanging baskets outside, where I could avoid the humid, sweaty heat of the greenhouses. I was wearing black shorts and a red polo, and my tool belt to prune and deadhead plants as I went. With the hose in my hand and sunnies on my face, I was busy, but enjoying the solitary job at the quietest part of the garden center. Well, hello there. Out of particularly nowhere, he slipped out behind some wooden trellises and looked me up and down, smiling with his weird, too small teeth. His eyes lingered on me for what felt like an uncomfortable few seconds, and I turned off my hose and asked him if he needed anything. He shook his head and kind of shrugged, still smirking at my legs. "Okay, sir. Have a nice day." Let me know if you need anything. I turned to continue. Cag, as I called him, said, I've never seen you here before. You're a new one. Huh? Well, I've been here for 8 months now. I must have missed the memo that a beauty like you started. You have a nice tan. You look young, Cag said. Thanks. I'm 23. Anyways, I have to get back to work. Then Cag said, Nice to meet you, Casey. I suddenly remembered my name badge, and slightly irritated that he now knew my full name. I make a beeline for the smoking area, where the tool shed was, with an excuse to grab some smaller gardening gloves, and by the time I returned to the floor, he had left. As the weeks went by, he would come in the store regularly, usually mid-afternoon, coincidentally, around the time I started my shift. Most of the time I was the only cashier, so I would have to serve him. He would buy the most smallest, pointless things, like floristry wire, or a tiny bag of birdseed. It seems like he would purposely make a purchase with the intentions of interacting with me. He would make comments about my appearance, statements mostly like, You have your hair different today. Yesterday you had it down. You now have new glasses. Or that's a different lip color to yesterday's. He would always announce my name loudly and deliberately during every interaction. Felt uncomfortable, but I was 23 and just politely shrugging it off. Around Christmas time, I was decorating the artificial trees, and he cornered me in the forest of them at the back of the store. I kind of stood there and said thank you, but I couldn't keep it as a thought. It was inappropriate to take gifts from customers. He jumped out from behind one and made me jump, to which I was kind of pissed about him doing because I dropped a glass of ornament, and it had smashed all over the floor. He bent down also to try to help, grabbing my wrist and telling me not to touch the glass. His grip was scarily tight and forceful, and his hands were clammy and gross. I slipped my hand out of his grip and asked if I could help him with anything. That's when it got weird. He pulled out a leaflet, and his back pocket told me that he was an artist and had a Christmas art showing happening in the local church hall, and he wanted me to go with him. He told me that he was a painter, and he thought I would like his work. I asked him if he wanted me to pin the leaflet to the local event board, and he reached out and touched my arm and said, No, the invitation is specifically for you. He pointed his finger and jabbed it into my breast and said, You. So I'm standing there in a dark corner, obscured from view by artificial Christmas trees, just kind of cornered by this guy who was touching me. I cringed away and said I was busy with my boyfriend that day. Sorry, and kind of scampered off. I remember feeling really strange after that. The fact he grabbed my wrist and jabbed his finger into my chest that way. I told a few of my colleagues about it, and they all told me they would warn me next time he was in the store so I could maybe hang out of the storeroom until he was gone. Well, that memo just missed a few of the temp Christmas staff because one day I got told by one, Your friend is asking for you at the tills. It wasn't unusual for my friends to stop by as it was fairly popular for gifts, etc. So I think it was maybe my ex's mom or something. I head to the till and there he is. He's holding a piece of paper. I cringe, but he had seen me now, so I walk over and asked what he needed from me. He passed the paper over and asked me to open it. Folded up was a drawing of me, with exaggerated breasts and cartoon-like eyes watering the hanging baskets in a suggestive kind of position. I kind of stood there and said thank you, but I couldn't keep it, as I thought it was inappropriate to take gifts from customers. I handed it back to him, and he kind of looked at me with this angry stare. He turned around and walked out without another word. By this point, I had had enough. I knocked on my manager's door and told him about the whole scenario that had just happened and all the previous interactions I had had with him over the past year. He watched the CCTV and agreed that it was so strange that he gave me this gross picture and told me he would talk to him if he came back. He praised me for my reaction to his advances and said I was doing the right thing and he could try and see him off next time. The next day was a Sunday and I was not due into work. My boss calls me and tells me he just received a call from HQ stating that an anonymous caller had called in to report a staff member inappropriately coming on to the customer. The staff member they had described and named was me. The caller had said that I had been inappropriate towards him at work, offered to do it with him, had led him on and obviously promiscuous, and that I had been pursuing him for over a year. The jerk even described a fictitious relationship we had had, and ranted loudly about how I had cheated on my boyfriend before hanging up. HQ quickly didn't believe a word, as my manager had already mentioned the guy to one of the higher-ups, but they thought it was wise to let me know about this crazy guy and suggested I report it to the police. The next day, I did just that. The officer I spoke with said that he matched the description of a man who was a local pest, somebody who often harassed young girls in the local area. He was also known to stalk girls in his car and attempted to abduct a young girl 4 years ago. The police officers assured me that he would file a report and talk to him officially, and that he was not allowed in the garden center or anywhere near me ever again, and if he did, and I was to call the police, and he would be arrested. Unfortunately, though, it never happened. It never stopped him sending a ranting letter to my workplace addressed to me, saying he would kill himself if I didn't take him back and receive his gifts of what he drew of me. Fortunately, the police saw this as unsolicited contact, and he was thankfully arrested. So creepy artist guy, let's not meet, ever again.
It was the fall of 2017, and I was 15 in New York. I was a competitive athlete in high school, the type who got up before school for workouts and trained for long hours after. With recruiting season a year away, I was under tremendous pressure to perform in my sport, as well as in the classroom. I was struggling to keep up in calculus at the time, so my mom suggested I get a tutor. She made an appointment with a teacher friend of hers who really knew his stuff. I'd been going to him regularly, probably 3 times a week for a month. Before I met Alex had a tutoring session right after mine, and we'd cross paths every week. It had never been more than a glance and a smile, as I was incredibly shy and terrified of boys. He was tall and blonde with piercing blue eyes, so naturally I thought he was cute. One day, my tutor had to change his schedule and decided to book us together, as we were learning the same topics in calculus. I was shocked and delighted when Alex started chatting with me afterwards and asked me for my phone number. I had never had a boy pay attention to me in that way, and I was flattered that someone that cute wanted my number. Eventually, Alex and I began dating. Alex went to Catholic school in another town, but because he lived in the same town as I did, he took the bus every morning from my school to his. This gave us most mornings together, and he was able to meet my friends. I was taken a little back when they didn't take to him like I did. They mentioned him being weird, and I got super defensive, but I let it go. I realized that I'd been spending less time with them than I normally did, and assumed that they were jealous that I had a boyfriend. As time went on, things got more serious. We started experimenting sexually, and eventually I lost my virginity to him back in my Ford Escape. That's when things began to change. While Alex and I always talked regularly, he started getting over the top about staying in contact with me. He would make me stay on the phone with him all hours of the night, until eventually my mom started taking my phone before I went to sleep. This relationship also started taking a toll on my athletic career. I was too tired to spend my extra time training and started skipping my practices just to see him, driving 30 minutes each way to his school. Eventually my friends sat me down and told me how unhealthy this relationship has become. I had isolated myself from them, and my entire free time was spent with him. At this point, I wanted so badly to end the relationship. I had fallen out of love with Alex, and college applications were approaching. I had been scouted by no less than 10 colleges, and my plan was to attend Brown. My dream school, of course. Alex's obsession with our relationship had taken a huge toll on his grades, and Brown wasn't going to be an option for him. I remember that I told him that was where I was planning on going, and he freaked out on me, saying he would never get in there, and begging me not to go. At the time, I was also recruited by the University of Illinois. Alex applied there in hopes that I would ditch Brown and go to Illinois with him. That was the final straw for me. I ended things for good with Alex, assuming that would be it. Because Alex would take the bus from school every morning, I still had to see him. I remember walking into school past him and his classmates who took the bus with him, and some of his guy friends yelled out slut and whore at me. Apparently it had spread a rumor that I had cheated on him with a bunch of guys, and then ended it with him. I ignored it, until I started getting Facebook messages from random people at his school. I spent months getting nasty messages from guys from his school, accusing me of having STDs, and telling me I was going to get gangbanged at by his friends. Eventually I had to delete my Facebook because it wouldn't stop. I think deleting my Facebook was what set off the stalker tendencies for Alex. He wasn't able to see my face online, so he started calling nonstop and sending desperate AIM messages telling me he loved me. While this was going on, I was the favorite to win the high school championship in my sport. I'd gone undefeated all season. Alex ended up showing up while I competed for the championship, and I saw him there. It shook me so badly, I ended up losing the title. I was furious and heartbroken. I ended up picking up his call that came that night and screamed at him, telling him never to contact me ever again. That's when the threats began. I got a call a few nights later from Alex. After he texted me, he had something important to tell me. Stupidly, I answered him. He began to tell me how he was going to hurt me, how he was going to show up at my house when my parents were at work with a rope and a knife and make sure I suffer like I'd done to him. I started to cry, and he eventually went on to say he was going to get me before I went into school, because he knew exactly where I parked every morning, and my parents were never going to find me again. At this point, I had decided to record what was being said, and had it taped on my phone. I hung up once I felt he'd said enough. The next morning, I went into school extra early, much earlier than I figured he'd be there. I showed my advisor the recording, who then called my mom. I remember feeling a deep-rooted shame as my mom listened to the recording, like I had done something to bring this on myself. My advisor was so alarmed by the recording, he advised me to go to the police. This day still feels surreal to me. My mom and I sat in the police station all day, explaining the story of my relationship with Alex and how it got to this point. The police then drove to his high school and arrested him while he was in class. The topper on the day, though, was when I went out to bring food back to the police station for my mom and I pulled into the station at the same time as the car holding Alex did. I saw him in cuffs, and he indeed looked like he wanted to end me. I got a restraining order against Alex, and he was sent to a mental institution for a short while. He ended up breaking the RO on more than one occasion. I contacted the police, but they didn't think it was just cause to do anything. I think it's important to note that Alex's family was wealthy and had a name in the area, so it wouldn't have surprised me if that's why they brushed it under the rug. I ended up attending Brown and had to inform them of the RO and let them know that Alex should not be allowed on campus. It's been over 10 years since this happened, and I still continue to receive phone calls and friend requests from him on occasions. I recently moved across the country from where this occurred. I finally feel safe now that I am far from where I used to live. But anytime I get a blocked call or text message from a number I do not know, a thought crosses my mind that it may be him. It's safe to say that this experience has completely changed who I let into my life and who I choose to date. Alex, let's not meet ever again.
When I was in high school, my freshman year, I had a small group of friends. We all ran cross country together and got pretty close. We would hang out together after school as well. Things started to unravel when one of the guys in the group started asking me out all the time. I had no feelings for him and was constantly turning him down. Then, he started to get really weird. He would write me letters that were basically his fantasies about me. and then the letters I would reciprocate. One time, when the group was all at his house, he told me he wanted to show me something in his room, and me, being a bit naive, went with him. Only when we got in his room did I realize I was alone with him, and that he had shut the door behind us. Nothing happened, but I got a weird feeling and ran out of the room as quickly as I could. Our friendship really deteriorated after that. He would call me, text me, message me constantly, and even show up at my parents' house unannounced. I did my best to cut him out of my life. After he graduated high school, I had blocked him on everything, so communication finally ended. Fast forward about 8 years. On my birthday, I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer, but they left me a voicemail. It was him. He said he got me a present that he wanted to give me. I just needed to call him back. My heart dropped. I don't know how he got my number, because it was different from the one I had in high school. I decided to ignore him and not call him back. He kept calling and leaving me messages for a few weeks. Finally, he left me a voicemail that said, "I'm going to make this really short. If you don't meet up with me, I'm going to end myself." I called the police and reported it so he could be checked up on. The problem was, I had no info on him. I only knew his name and phone number. I didn't know where he lived now or anything else. They said they would look into it. I didn't get any more calls from him. 2 months later, my little sister called me in a panic during broad daylight. My stalker had gone to my parents' house, let himself inside, and gone down to the basement where my room was. She had opened the door to her room and found him standing there. She confronted him, and he quickly left the house, but stayed in the driveway by his car. She woke up my mom, who had recognized him. She confronted him outside while my sister called the police. He told her they told him he could come over and see me. He left before the police got there. They wrote a report, and that was all that happened. The police told us that they couldn't find him, and we really couldn't press charges because the door had been unlocked, and there were no trespassing signs in our yard. I was on edge, and my sister was on edge for months. Finally, the police let us know they found him. Someone else had called the police on him for a different reason, and when the police tried to apprehend him, he stabbed one of the cops with a pick. He's in jail now for less than a year for both charges. We have a restraining order against him as well. I just hope this is the end of it all. I'm terrified if he found out my new number. He can find my new address as well. I would have never expected violence from him, but now I know he is capable of it. Stalker, let's not meet again.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night, and I'll see you next time.